Welcome to this tutorial, where I will teach you how to use Clip Studio Paint to draw a castle. This tutorial focuses mainly on how to use the tools to draw a 3-point perspective castle. So, a bit of prior knowledge on perspective and the basic function of Clip Studio Paint will come in handy. Before we dive in, I would like to clarify the distinction between layers and tools. Typically, when drawing, we work with regular rasterized layers. However, in this tutorial, I'll be using vector layers exclusively. Vector layers create dots or control points for every single line we draw, making it easier for us to manipulate every single line. I strongly recommend setting these tools as shortcut keys first, because we will be using them throughout the entire drawing process. Go to File, click on Shortcut Settings, and select Tools from Category. Scroll down and expand the Figure panel, then set shortcut keys for these tools: Straight Line, Curve, Rectangle, and Ellipse. Scroll upward, expand the Operation panel, and set a shortcut key for Object. Then scroll up again, expand the Correct Line panel, and set a shortcut key for Control Point and Adjust Line Width. You should only have one Adjust Line Width. I will explain why I created a copy of this subtool later on. Now, let's compare drawing with a normal pen versus using the Straight Line tool and Curve tool under a vector layer. The lines on the left side, drawn with the default G pen, exhibit multiple dots or control points. Conversely, the lines on the right side, drawn with the Straight Line tool and Curve tool, only have 2 control points. By pressing the Object tool shortcut key we set earlier, or holding the Control key and selecting a point of the line, we can easily alter the length and direction of the line. However, when dealing with vector lines created by the pen tool, modifying them becomes nearly impossible due to the presence of multiple control points. In contrast, using the Straight Line tool to draw lines allows for effortless adjustments, since there are only 2 control points at each end. Similarly, with the Curve tool, we have the flexibility to change the curvature whenever needed. Relocating the line position on the canvas is also easy. Simply hold Ctrl or use the Object tool to drag the lines to the desired position. This technique is incredibly useful and time-saving, especially when drawing buildings, vehicles, electrical appliances, or any technical drawing that require the perspective ruler. For this Cubes X example, as you can see, adjusting the lines drawn by the default pen tool is almost impossible. However, with the Straight Line and Curve tool, adjusting becomes much more manageable. The second advantage of drawing in a vector layer is the ability to use the vector eraser for swift line removal. Simply navigate to the Tool property and check the vector eraser column box. There are 3 options available, but we'll only use the middle and the last one. Choosing the middle one erases up to the intersection of lines. While selecting the third one erases the entire line, irrespective of intersections. The third advantage is the ease of adjusting the line width. Press the shortcut key we set earlier for Adjust Line Width. Below the Tool property, click on Thicken or Narrow to adjust the line width. Typically, I use Thicken to enhance the contour line of the drawing, and Narrow for line details. To conveniently switch between them, I duplicate the same subtool with different function. Following this, you can set the same shortcut key for that duplicated subtool. You can change the value for a more noticeable difference, but I prefer a slight one, so I set it as 0.5. If I want a greater line width difference, I usually just thicken or narrow the lines multiple times. We can't achieve a perfect contour line using this tool alone. We also need the control point tool. Select split line under the tool property to split the lines that we do not want to be thickened. By employing these three tools interchangeably, we can create a dynamic line art drawing. Phase 1. Deciding overall composition. For compositional purpose, the canvas doesn't have to be exactly A4 size. I experimented with various angles of a cube or rectangle to convey the overall feel of the castle I wanted to present to the audience. I also sketched the plane and sometimes the horizon line to illustrate the angle. I don't recommend using 3D primitives as substitutes unless you are already familiar with drawing cubes. Drawing cubes is a foundational skill in art. You basically cannot draw anything if you can't even draw a box in different angle. Among all compositions, I don't recommend using a completely flat front view because it appears two-dimensional. This is unless you are intentionally aiming for a front view design for concept art, which we'll delve into in the next phase. I opted a foreshortened front view at a slight low angle. The storytelling I aim to convey is the initial introduction of the character seeing the castle for the first time. Phase 2. Sketching out the concept design. I don't go to detailing at this stage. I consider two main aspects: the form or shape design and composition, specifically the leading lines or arrangement of objects. For this drawing, I've chosen to use a triangle arrangement. I've also decided to draw a magical fantasy castle theme adorned with crystals. Regarding forms, I am opting for simplicity, like cylinder and rectangular. In terms of shape design, you can observe big, medium, and small triangles arranged from top to bottom, forming a triangular composition. Now, this is probably something you would draw in a front view, which perfectly represents one-point perspective. To create something more interesting, we actually can make the forms rotate by adding a two-point perspective. I want to talk about a perspective rotational theory you probably didn't realize even after years of drawing. This probably could be the most important tip in this tutorial. Let's examine this image. A front or side view is essentially in one-point perspective. However, in the second image, as the object rotates, it transitions into two-point perspective. When the cube starts rotating slightly to the right, the left vanishing point moves away from the center point in a short distance, indicating a smaller surface area, while the right vanishing point moves further away from the center, indicating a larger surface area. When the cube is halfway turned, both vanishing points are at a similar distance, indicating an equal surface area on both sides of the cube. As the cube continues to rotate further, the left vanishing point moves further away from the center, and the right vanishing point gets closer to the center, creating the opposite situation of the second image we saw just now. Once the cube completes a full 90-degree rotation, you can see there is only one vanishing point, which represents 1 point perspective. So instead of drawing with just 1 point perspective, we can incorporate both 1 point and 2 point perspectives sharing the same horizon line in a drawing. Let's apply this rotational theory to drawing the castle. As you can see, I rotated some of the forms, and I made the central tower into a hexagonal prism. I've also made the forms arranged in a circular formation instead of a straight line. You can observe the circle I drew to illustrate how the castle would be viewed from the top. While there is nothing wrong with drawing everything in 1 point perspective, I personally find that incorporating a 2 point perspective makes the drawing more visually engaging. Next, I began detailing the castle. At this point, I'm using a combination of the default pen tool and straight line tool. It's important to note that this is still a sketch. I don't recommend investing too much time in drawing these details, as we'll be redrawing everything in a new canvas with proper perspective. I only focus on sketching the details at the focal point, which is the middle section of the castle. I leave the rest blank because I am clear of the overall design. You can sketch everything if you prefer. Phase 3. Setting up perspective ruler and drawing the big forms. This phase essentially combines Phase 1 and Phase 2. Create a new canvas with a size similar to the chosen thumbnail, and remember to create a new vector layer. Select the ruler icon from the toolbar and choose the symmetrical ruler. While holding Shift, draw a vertical line anywhere. Then open the Align Distribute panel from the window. Press the Object shortcut key and select the vertical line. Choose Canvas from the first row. Then select Align Horizontal Center in the second row. Right-click the ruler icon to select Show in All Layers. Then go to the Layer menu command, select Ruler Frame, choose Create Perspective Ruler, then 3-point perspective. Do not draw on the perspective layer, because we will be creating more perspective rulers for rotation purpose later. For safety precaution, I recommend convert the rasterized perspective layer to vector layer first by right-clicking on the layer name. If you accidentally draw on the perspective layer, simply select all the lines with a lasso tool, cut them to a new vector layer, and merge the two vector layers together. I aim to align the vanishing points in the middle, but unfortunately the alignment tool doesn't work on the perspective ruler. Therefore, I have to drag it manually, following the symmetry line we created earlier. After adjusting, I use the straight line tool to draw and test out the foreshortened lines, and also making sure to have a straight line in the middle. Before diving into the drawing, one approach is to duplicate the design sketch as a reference layer and transform the sketch design to align with the perspective lines by dragging the transform handles. Some artists prefer starting from blank canvas, but personally, I prefer starting by using this method. If we are dealing with angles beyond the front view, such as a quarter view or a high angle view, we need to draw the sketch design in both front and side view, so that we can align them in each respective perspective line. In this case, a single front view sketch is enough. It's crucial to note that we are drawing the castle at a slight low angle. Make sure to draw the lower surface of each form later on. For this tutorial, I have already filtered out the sketch lines, because I want to keep the canvas clean so that you can see easily. Activate Snap to Special Ruler for both symmetry and perspective drawing. I started to draw the main tower first. You will notice that I cannot draw a horizontal line. To overcome this, you can either deactivate Snap to Special Ruler or hide the perspective layer. If you deactivate Snap to Special Ruler, both the symmetry and perspective rulers will be disabled simultaneously, since they both belong to the special ruler. If you hide the perspective layer, you lose only the perspective ruler while retaining the symmetry ruler. To draw the other side of the tower, I drag the handle of the vanishing line to match the edge of the line, and I adjust the line slope there. I find this method easier than dragging from the vanishing point on the horizon line. To give the roof a slight curve, I use Curve Tool to drag a straight line and adjust the curvature to follow the perspective. While I can adjust the curvature again, these adjustments won't be mirrored to the other side. So I can either draw it in one shot, or I can flip to the other side. I will show you the flipping method later. Next, I hide the perspective layer. I use Straight Line tool to draw the roof. Then I deactivate the snap icon and hide the symmetry ruler to draw the tip of the tower using the Curve tool. I deactivate both because I prefer to draw the tip in a single curved line. While the function and tools may seem a bit confusing initially, trust me, with a bit of practice, everything will become easy once you understand the logic of how the tools and functions work. Moving on, I want to draw the tower below, but at a 45-degree rotation. To do this, select and create a duplicate of your perspective layer. Hide the previous perspective layer. Drag the perspective point from the new perspective layer to align with the desired line and adjust the slope there. By doing this, we have created a new set of 3-point perspective sharing the same horizon line but with different vanishing points. At this point, I prefer to hide the symmetry ruler because I am not comfortable drawing the lines in one shot, and the adjustments I made cannot be mirrored on the other side. In addition to turning off the snap function, you can also achieve the same result by drawing a line first, then hold Ctrl or use Object tool to easily adjust the line direction while still keeping the snap function on. If you want to duplicate any line, use Object tool or hold Ctrl to select the line, then press C and V. The duplicated line will be in the same position. You can drag it to a different location. Moving forward, let's delve into drawing a cylindrical tower. But before that, I would like to share a small perspective theory you probably might not be aware of. In one-point perspective, a cylinder without foreshortening exhibits an oval-shaped bottom. Now when we introduce foreshortening, simulating a 3-point perspective, observe how the bottom surface shape changes as the cylinder moves towards the left or right. The oval shape becomes slightly slanted, akin to what we depict with straight lines in 3-point perspective. In 3-point perspective, the further a straight line is from the center point, the more pronounced the slant becomes. You can also observe that there are no alterations in the shapes and silhouettes as the cylinder rotates. Since the tower is slightly away from the perspective center, we need to rotate the oval slightly to the right. I duplicate a few ovals because I want to use them as a guide to draw windows later on. Remember to adjust the width and height of the oval after duplicating them, as ellipses closer to the horizon line will appear more flattened, while those higher up will be closer to a circular shape. Next, I want to draw the main window in the middle. Since the window is in the front view, we need to create a 1-point perspective. To do this, duplicate the current perspective layer, hide the previous one and adjust one of the vanishing points to the center. I made a mistake here by not perfectly matching the vanishing points to the middle, so please double check the vanishing points before you start drawing. I draw a middle guideline using a different color. Then I draw the roof line to meet the guideline. To draw the roof line, use the method I showed before. You can either disable the snap function, hide the perspective layer, or simply draw a line first, then change the line direction. All the guidelines and excessive lines will be erased by using vector eraser easily. To better visualize the image, I sometimes turn on and off the symmetry ruler. I usually just turn it off when I need to adjust the lines frequently. Moving on, I want to draw an ornamental design in the middle. However, since the ornamental design is supposed to be in front, and I didn't draw that first, so to overcome this issue, I lower the opacity of current layer and create a new vector layer to draw on top of it. I draw the ornamental design using curve tool and sometimes using the pen tool. If you prefer, you can use a pen tool to draw the curved line, but the drawback is that you will lose the flexibility to adjust the lines, so you have to draw carefully if you use the pen tool. If you find the lines annoying, you can change the color of the lines by clicking the Change Layer Color icon located at the right corner of Layer property. Initially, it will change to blue, But if you prefer a different color, click on blue color displayed box to select an alternative. Rotating the canvas to an angle might help you in drawing the curve. Make sure to draw the lower surface for the ornamental design, as this perspective is slightly from a lower angle. After turning the layer color into blue, we can erase all the unnecessary blue lines easily. Then, we revert the layer color back to black again. Merge the two line vector layers into a single vector layer. Next, I want to draw a tower with a different rotation. The method is the same as before. Duplicate the current perspective layer, hide the previous one, and adjust the new perspective vanishing line. Once again, I aim for a different rotation for this smaller tower at the corner, and the method remains the same. For this part of the drawing, I've chosen to slightly deviate from the perspective guide when designing the roof. This is an intentional design choice to give the structure a bit unique look. You can notice that the middle part of the roof is slightly taller than the corners, creating an interesting shape. You can use this technique to add individuality and style to your architectural drawings. If you are not familiar with finding the center point of a mask, a simple method is to draw an X or diagonal lines at the top or bottom of the plane. Once you have found the middle point of the plane, you can extend the point up, and that will be the center point of the roof. Another method to find the center of the mask is to draw a line down the middle of the entire structure. I've drawn this line in red for clarity. This line should divide the structure into two equal halves. After drawing the roof line, use the vector eraser tool to remove the guidelines. This will leave you with a clean, symmetrical roof design. Next, I want to draw the floating bow. I'm not sure what should I call it. I deactivate Snap to Ruler function and use the ellipse and curve tools to draw it. After completing the overall forms, you may want to visualize the entire artwork. To do this, we need to duplicate the left side and flip it to the right side. First, select the Polyline tool from the Selection tool menu. Zoom in on the canvas to ensure accurate placement of your first point. Hold Shift and drag down to the bottom of your drawing. Move to the right, up, and back to the initial point to create a selection. Then, erase or delete all the lines on the right side of your drawing. Then, invert the selection by pressing Ctrl, Shift, and I simultaneously, or choosing Invert Selected Area from the Select menu command. Next, open the Alignment menu and choose Selection Area from the first row. Make sure to check the box at the bottom to activate Align Vector Paths before selecting Align Left Edges from the second row. Finally, press Ctrl T to horizontally flip the lines, resulting in a symmetrical image. When zooming in, you may observe some of the lines are not connecting perfectly. We will address this by deleting and redrawing them manually in the final phase. Currently, my focus is on visualizing the overall composition. After completing all the details on the left side, I will duplicate and flip it to the right. Then I only start to fix any imperfect line connections there. I want to introduce a bit of asymmetry on the right side. To achieve this, I'll begin by erasing the parts I want to differ from the symmetry. Afterwards, I create a new vector layer to draw on top. This asymmetry layer should remain separate. Do not merge it with other layers. Once you have completed the overall forms, it's time to move on to the next phase. Phase 4. Detailing. This phase involves adding smaller forms and textures to your drawing. If you are unsure about the design, feel free to duplicate multiple layers and experiment. To add smaller forms to the building, change the line color and lower its opacity. Then, create a new vector layer on top to draw the details. Close the current perspective layer and open the previous perspective layer that corresponds to the tower you are detailing. At this point, you might need to rename your perspective layers for better organization. When drawing the details, you can use any color choice for guidelines. As always, once you are done, you can erase all the guidelines easily using vector eraser. Revert the color back to black and merge it with the previous layer. Moving on to the cylindrical tower, I am going to draw a flag and some windows on it. Remember the ovals we created earlier? We will use those as a guide. If you prefer, you can erase and redraw these oval guidelines in a different color for better visibility. Make sure to turn off the snap function when rotating and adjusting the oval sizes, as perspective rulers are not needed when drawing circular forms. You can refer to the cylinder perspective theory I explained earlier. When erasing the excess lines from the ovals, I sometimes switch off the vector eraser to maintain the curvature of the oval line. This is because a vector eraser can sometimes alter the path of the oval line, changing its curvature. I usually encounter this issue specifically with oval line. The time it takes to draw the guidelines and details depends on the level of complexity you desire. If you aim for more details, it naturally takes longer time. In my case, as I intended this piece for my portfolio, I invested hours in carefully calculating the guidelines and drawing the details. While I won't be presenting the entire process here to keep the video from becoming too long, I've already covered all the necessary tools and drawing methods, which remain consistent throughout. If you encounter challenges in drawing specific forms in perspective, revisiting the basic of perspective drawing might be helpful. Despite the detailed approach, I kept the forms for this castle relatively simple. If you have already completed all the details of the left side, you just need to repeat the flipping symmetry method I showed earlier. Now, if you want to draw a texture or ornamental design on the wall of the castle, create a new canvas and draw the texture design there in full front view. Then, copy it to the castle drawing as a new layer. Draw a guideline to indicate where you want your texture to be placed. Then, use the transform tool by pressing Ctrl and T and drag the handle to match the perspective line. If needed, you can also align it with the vanishing line from the perspective layer. Phase 5. Adjustments. After dedicating several hours to drawing, I finally completed drawing the castle. To streamline the design process, I duplicate all the line vector layers and merge them into a single vector layer. Making a backup first before merging them is advisable. This way, I can always revisit the layers and make changes if necessary. I wanted to slightly increase the height of the castle, so I used the transform tool to stretch the castle taller. At this point, I also want to draw the background, so again use the method I showed before. Lower the opacity, change the layer color, create a new vector layer to draw on top of it. Afterwards, just erase any unnecessary lines before reverting the layer color to black. Finally, we can make a dynamic line art by adjusting the line width, the same method I showed earlier in this tutorial. This is the final result, and I'm happy with it. If you want to proceed to coloring, simply save it as a new file first. Then, rasterize the line art vector layer and delete all the unnecessary layers underneath. That's it for this tutorial. I hope you'll find it useful when drawing a castle or any perspective drawing in Clip Studio Paint. By the way, this is the overall color mood I've painted for this castle. If given the opportunity, I will be happy to explain my coloring process in a future session. I hope you enjoyed the journey as much as I did. Thank you for watching. Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below.